But before we actually start doing the queries, we need to enter the data into the database. So you'll need to enter the data working from the sample data that's been given. Just be careful when you're keying this in. You need to get it in accurately and correctly. So for example, customer ID, make sure you pick up all the right information about the customer. So we've got the customer ID, the surname, the phone number and house number. Now the event, we've got event ID, and if you come along we've got event date, event type, cost per guest and number of guests. And then when it comes to the guests, we've got guest 1, then guest surname, guest 2, guest surname. And then finally, do the table which has got the 2 foreign keys, so that's TBL event guest. And for example, in this, you're going to have event ID, guest ID, and then the dietary requirement. So it just takes a bit of care entering that data to make sure you get it in correctly. Let's have a look at the queries that we've got to do. You'll get 2 queries. The first one is a fairly straightforward query. Probably involves some sort of sorting, selection of data, and maybe showing certain fields. And then the second query is a little bit more complex. That will involve maybe some calculation, use of some functions, like the if, for example, and displaying of certain fields. Let's have a look at the first one. So using the Legend Events database, create the queries below. The first query is create a query to display customers for events that have more than 20 guests. It should show customer surname and event date in descending order only. So here we have Access Open. I'm going on to create. We're going to use query design. And the first thing we need to do is add the tables that are going into our query. We need the number of guests, and that will appear in TBL event. So there it is, the max number of guests. We also need to show the customer surname, so that will be in TBL customer. We need the event date, so that's there, event date. And that's it, I think. Just make sure when you get your tables in that you've got your relationship lines showing in the window. If the tables aren't connected with a line, you may need to add further tables. If they're not there, you try and run your query, you won't get the correct results. We need to show the customer surname, the event date, for those with a maximum number of guests of more than 20. So I've just added those fields to the query, and we want those that are greater than 20. Under the max no guests column, come down to the query row, and in here we're going to put greater than 20. So that should pick out all those events that have greater than 20 guests. And we need to have this event date in descending order only. So let's have a look at the event date. We'll click on the sort row and click descending. So let's just check we've got everything. Create a query to display customers for events that have more than 20 guests, so we've dealt with that. It must show the customer surname, the event date, in descending order. We don't want the maximum number of guests displayed, so we can untick the max no guest. If we run that, we've got 3 events with greater than 20. Quick check on that. I've gone back to TBL events. We've got event 1, 75, event 2, 50, event 3, 80. There are no more, so we've got 3 events over 20. Just a final check, the event date is in descending order. Save the query. Always use QRY. Prefix your query names. and then some appropriate name which indicates what the query is about. This next query is the more complicated one. Let's have a look at it. Create a query to calculate the total cost of training events. Events that have 50 or more guests should have 4 asterisks to indicate it's a large event. We need to display the customer surname, the event date, the number of guests, the cost per guest, and the total cost of the event. So on to create, again query design, and we need to put the tables into the query. So we know we need the customer surname, so that's in TBL customer. We know we need the event date, the number of guests and the cost per guest. They're in TBL event. We've got event date, cost per guest, number of guests, total cost we're going to work out. The other thing we need, just remember if we just go back to the query, we need to calculate the total cost of training events, so we want that event type as well. So let's put in the customer surname, the event date, the event type, the cost per guest, and the maximum number of guests. We want the total cost of all training events, so under event type, in the criteria row, I'm going to key in training. And I'm going to untick the show row because we don't want that displaying in the final result. The next thing is to work out the total cost of the event. So in this next column, I'm going to do a calculated field. The total cost of an event is worked out by calculating the cost per guest times by the maximum number of guests. So we're going to use the builder, so right mouse click and build. And we're going to call this total cost, then a colon, and it's cost per guest times by max no guests. And this is an expression. I've added the total row to the query by going up to totals and clicking on the button. And if we just click on the drop down, let me pull this up, we say C. We're going to select expression. The next thing to do now is to run that and just have a quick check. That's 75 times 40 is £3,000. 10 times 40 is 400, and 80 times 45 is 3,600. So the calculation is correct. The next thing is to create the asterisk next to those events that have got more than 50 guests. So we should expect asterisks next to this event here. They've got 80. This event here, 75, but not this event because there's only 10. So in this next column, right mouse click and build. And I'm going to call this large event, and then a colon. And I'm going to use the if function. So if, open bracket, max no guess, greater than 50, then a comma. So that's our test part of our if. We've now got the true action. So if that's true, it is greater than 50. We need to put the 4 stars next to the event. Then a comma, and now we've got the false action. So if that's not true, we don't want 4 stars, we just want nothing, so we just put empty quote marks and then close the bracket. And again, just looking at this, we can see that Access has capitalised the if and the max no guess, therefore it's syntactically correct. And don't forget to change this to an expression. Let's run it and see what happens. And here we've got 75 guess, large event, 80 guess, large event. Make sure you save your query, use QRY as the prefix and an appropriate name that indicates what's in the query, so in this case, total cost. That's the 2 queries completed now. In the next video, I'll show you how to do the report.